It's it's what I came to do.
We'll figure out StreamYard. It's fine. Hi.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I guess we're live. I guess who knows? It's new technology to me. So good evening, good afternoon to everybody. Hi, I'm Stephen Arian. I'm a traditionally published fantasy author. And joining me this afternoon and this evening is Alexa Dunn.
Hi. Yeah, I just got the notification, so we're
live.
Okay.
That we're live. Okay, that we know we're live now. Okay.
The miracle is that I got the notification.
Like she says,
YouTube is usually 20 minutes behind.
Like it's a massive delay. Like, what's going on?
I've missed streams because YouTube notifications were that late. So, well, and in fairness, that was on my phone. It's the desktop notifications suck.
Okay.
So welcome to people coming in.
Yeah, from the UK and across the pond, because you're 8 hours behind me. It's bedtime for me. It's just like early afternoon for you.
So what time is it there?
It's like 10 o'clock, like 5 after 10.
Oh,
it's time for bed.
I would be so tired.
Lots of coffee. Lots of caffeine to keep me going.
Right?
Are you a night owl, or are you like an early morning person?
I'm a night person. I start writing at 10 p.m. usually-ish.
Okay.
Yeah. Unless I'm really disciplined and I start at 8 or 9 p.m.
Yeah.
I don't usually write past midnight, though. I do try to go to bed between midnight and 1, and then I wake up for work at 8:30, which I'm very lucky. And that's pandemic life, mind you. I roll out of bed and start working in my pajamas.
Some people say it's leaving later there. Angelina says it's 11 o'clock at night. Wow, really late there.
That's someone on the continent.
So doing this tonight because we're both traditionally published. We're going to talk a bit about our experiences and all of that, really. But when did you first start thinking, I'm going to go for traditional publishing just when did you think about starting to write books and take it seriously and try and submit to agents? When did it kind of come to you?
Yeah, I was in Harry Potter fandom and it kind of sprang out of that ish. Because, most famously, Cassandra Clare made the jump. She was a fanfic writer, and then she published the Mortal Instruments. So it was kind of on my radar. And another really popular author who is now, I'll use her real name, Sarah Reese Brennan. I won't use her fandom name. She also made the jump. And so it was like, wait, you can do that. So that was the very early genesis in the mid to late 2000s. But then it took me another 4 years to actually write something past 10K, 20K. If you count it technically from the start, it took me 10 years, but really I don't count until I wrote a book. So I finished something in 2013. And why traditional publishing? I mean, honestly, selfishly, and I'm not shy about this, I really wanted the clout, so to speak, meaning I wanted to be published by, my dream publisher at the time was Penguin. Yep. We all have a dream publisher and I wanted to be at Barnes and Noble. I wanted that. Also just I'm annoyingly practical, which you can tell from my channel. I did research and I was okay, I don't think I can do all of it. I just want to write books for the most part. That's all I wanted to focus on. Plus I knew I'd need a day job. I need to keep that. But I was working on Harry Potter conferences. It all comes back together. And I did a YA lit track for a Harry Potter conference in 2012. And so I invited a bunch of literary agents and authors. I had Veronica Roth before Divergent really blew up because I read that book and I was like, you've got something. I want you at my conference. I had Libba Bray, which was just about me meeting my heroes. So I invited a bunch of people I really liked. But it meant early on, I got to plan my dream panels where literary agents I admired would answer the questions I wanted to know. So I was surrounding myself with that stuff. And also through DragonCon. I just had exposure to traditional publishing through DragonCon because I did volunteer staff for that as well. That's the long answer.
Yeah.
But it was just I'm very goal oriented. I was I want that. I will research it as much as humanly possible, learn everything I can, including everything that might terrify me, and then I will go headlong into it. And then I finally finished a book. But it was meeting literary agents in person that made me go, oh, I should probably finish a book. So it gave me a goal. It gave me a real deadline, not a real deadline, but it was you've been fussing around on, I had been fussing around on the book that I was working on at the time, not quite a year, but I was like, I'm going to finish it. So I did. That was 2013 when I finished, early 2013. Okay. And my goal there was to enter a pitch contest, which I did without editing my book, which is a terrible idea, and don't do it. But I did it, and it was fine. Don't do that.
Okay. Lucky.
Well, then I had to revise my book in a week because I was an idiot, and I got into the pitch contest. And I did it. I learned how to revise very fast.
Yeah, with a week. Wow. That's
intense. Like a week, 10 days, because like it was mostly that there was going to be a showcase. It was pretty tight. We revised a query, and I was like, if someone requests it, I have to have the book ready. So yeah.
Mine's the longer. Well, the short version of the long story is I started querying in pen and paper days.
I watched your video, and I was like,
yeah. Like, so for those,
I never did that. I was always email.
Yeah. So I'm old enough that, when I was young, there was no internet. It didn't exist. We sat around and played in the mud. That was it. That's all we did.
I do remember pre-internet days. I wasn't interested in TradPub pre-internet days, luckily.
Trying to explain the world to some of my friends' kids, they're like, well, what did you do? And they just don't get it. They're like, well, how did you fill your time?
Your parent would drop you off at the mall, and you just set a time for them to pick you up. And if something happened, that was it. Maybe you found a payphone. Call your parents. You're meeting someone and they didn't show up. Too bad.
Yeah, there's no way. Anyway, so I started the pen and paper days, and I did the thing of finish a book. My first one I finished when I was like 21, and it was awful. It was awful. But I thought it was so good, I wrote the sequel because it was part of a series, and it was obviously going to sell. So I wrote the sequel, and that was terrible. And I started querying the first one, and it got rejected. Another book got rejected. And I just kept going. So it took me, it was something like 13 years of trying mostly fantasy before an agent in 2013, actually, the year that you were then querying, said to me, there's something there. And then that kind of started the ball rolling, and editing and all of that kind of stuff. And
so for you, like when you started, it was just TradPub. Like SouthPub wouldn't have even really been a viable option because back then it was just vanity publishing.
Exactly, yeah.
Things have changed completely.
Yes.
And actually, I guess when I started, that was still kind of a thing. We hadn't seen the rise of Amazon in quite the same way.
No.
Yeah. So it never occurred to me. But also, seriously, I don't want to do all that work.
It's running a business. It is
running a business.
As much as we have to do as traditionally published authors, we have to do more than others have done in the past in the same thing.
Yes.
But even so, there's a lot of stuff that's just not on my plate at all that I don't even have to think about. But there are people even worse off than us. So I did a conference in France. So when I was talking to the authors out there, they don't have literary agents in France.
I've heard that in certain countries that
they don't
have that at all.
So I was talking to this French author, and I said to her, what do you mean? She said, well, I get the contracts and I have to go and work them out, and I go and talk to someone and hire a lawyer, and we talk it through and I'm just sat there like, oh my God. And she has to negotiate.
Yep. And if something happens, there's no one else backing you. Whereas like my favorite thing to do is when I'm annoyed, but I have to look good. So I will literally, because I do text my agent, I was like, I need you to bad cop me on this. And she does. I'll tell her exactly what I need her to do. And I'm a little direct. Not all clients do that. Like in many cases, agents will be like, I need to bad cop, but I will literally be like, I'm unhappy with this. Will you say this to them? Yeah.
Yeah. So we had a kind of related question, if I can show it. This is from Stephen the Longshanks. Hi, Stephen, saying, how do you compose a list of query of agents to query, and where do you start? So where did you start composing a list?
Yeah, well, and I also think what's interesting, because I watched yours, it's slightly different in the UK than the US. So really interesting to just slightly. Like you have resources that I don't think we have.
Okay.
I started classic method. I went to the bookstore. I pulled both comparative titles and titles by authors I liked off the shelf, and I checked the acknowledgements, and I started a list. That was like the starting point.
Yeah.
And then like lots of like little things. Online pitch contests have evolved since I was doing them, but at the time, the main place where I was on the internet was a very specific blog that would do secret agent contests and agent showcases. This is pre-Pitch Wars. It was called Miss Snark's First Victim, also where I found some great critique partners. But I would I would go through the secret agents that she did each month and be like, who is the secret agent and what was their taste? Because the agent would comment on every entry, like 30 people would win a slot. And then the agent would leave some sort of constructive feedback on each entry and request some of them. I would pay attention to that. Writer's Digest still does this, where they would do new agent alerts. That was something that helped me. Though the key there, because they still do it, is they will announce almost every new agent and they're not all created equal. So there has to be vetting that you do on top of that. But this is like, if it's just about list generation. There was also similarly a blog that I don't know if it's still going that was called Literary Rambles, and they would interview literary agents. So like it was very blog based in 2012, 2013. And even when I queried a second time in 2016, 2016? Yes, a lot of those resources time were still around.
Last 2 years are just.
But like now, in terms of advice I would give and resources, because this is how I help a lot of people, and you might just want to suck it up and pay yourself. I have a Publishers Marketplace subscription. I gifted it to myself and just continue to pay because I'm obsessed when I got my first book deal. So I never used it to query, but it's where most US-based agents report their sales. It's a lot of UK agents do, but not all of them. So that's important to know. It is not the best resource for other countries. But I love it because you can search keywords, comp titles, you can look at all of an agent's sales going back years, you can spot patterns. I'm obsessed with it. And so what you can do is find someone like me, not literally me because I don't know you, but like I look this up for friends and people like in my mentorship thing all the time. They'll just be like, I'm looking for X, or can you check this agent? And I will check for them. So you can do a one-time $25 for a month subscription.
Okay.
And I would do that potentially if it's something that you feel you can invest in, because it sucks when you spend money. Do a ton of research, make a really exhaustive list, and then cancel the subscription. That's what I would do. Career Tracker similarly is great for tracking this stuff, but I don't find it as good for organically finding agents because it's just a database that has every possible agent.
Right.
I found myself overwhelmed by all that information, and I used it to track my querying, but not to find agents, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's everything I used / recommend people use now. Just be very, very careful with the bookstore method, as you call it. I actually answered a query about this on Pub Tips on Reddit the other day, because the current landscape is bonkers, weird. A ton of agents are burned out, busy, retiring. So a lot of books on the shelf, especially if they're older, very likely their agents aren't even accepting new clients if they're still in the business. So always do secondary research and not rely entirely on that. That's why I recommend the Publishers Marketplace subscription, because it's like you can actually see who's selling books now in this market. Publishing is a mess and I love it.
I used and probably would still use the Writers and Artists Yearbook. I mean, they have a website now as well, but back in the old days,
was new to me.
Yeah. So when I first started, it was just the book. Now they also have the website, and it's like a big dictionary-sized book that's essentially an A to Z of all literary agents by agency, and that's like your first starting point. I would go through, highlight all the ones that did fantasy, pull up a list. Now, on top of that, what I would do, the same thing you kind of said, is go and find them online, because they'll have a website, they'll be on social media, find out if they're taking anybody on, if their list is open or closed, find out when the last time they published any news. The Bookseller is a really good website. It's free to join for a basic subscription, and just look at the deals, and that'll sort of say, so-and-so signed this deal for this person for 3 books. You know, they're still active, they're still actually doing something. A couple of my friends, their agents have done, like you said, they've retired, And so they're still working on books, and they've said, right, well, we're just a step away from the business, and that's like they've got to then go and find someone else. So it's really hard. So do your research before you contact anybody. Make sure do the back of the book as well. Go and look at whatever genre you want to write in. Go to that bookshop, pull some of the most news books off the shelf, see if they mention their agents in the back, get their names, and then go back online and find out if they're active or not. Those are kind of the tips I'd say for UK. And the last time I bought, if you can't afford to buy the Writers' House yearbook, go to your local library. They should have a copy. And there again, even if it's a year or two old, you can find it, use that basic info to then check online for more up-to-date stuff. Because it is quite expensive. It's like maybe 30 or 40 pounds, like $50 or $60 maybe. So it's a hefty old book, but it's a good starting point. The beginning, back in the day, it was the only resource I had. That was it. I was like, right. Yep. Okay, then
I guess they can charge that, and maybe
things have changed a bit.
I will say I know the US has something similar, and I want to say it's called the Writers Market. I know it exists. I've just never found it useful because my go-to is always the more recent and up-to-date information is going to be on the internet. So and that's just me being very internet savvy, but I know it exists and I know some people still use it. But it's also like even just last week, Sarah Davies announced that she was retiring, and that's the kind of information that's not going to be in a book that might have been published last year. So just always bear in mind. And that's a big one. She's Greenhouse Lit. That actually straddles US UK because that's a US UK agency. But that's big news because she's been in the business for 40 years, and she's not the only person I've seen announce that they are leaving the business. So
this last 2 years has changed so much. People's priorities.
It's changed so much.
We'll come on to that, about how writing during this period. But okay, tell me. We'll start with some good news. Where were you? Tell me the story when you got your agent said, I would like to represent you. I'd like to talk to you about your first book. Where were you? What was the story?
Yeah. So I was at WonderCon here in LA, in Anaheim. So I was on the convention floor, browsing stalls, and I got an email, and it said, I want to have a phone call. And so I already had an offer, so I knew what that meant. She wouldn't have bothered to ask for a call if it wasn't also an offer. And so I just remember walking giddily around the floor, and I had to find someone to tell because I was alone at that specific moment. Also, bless email on your phone. So great. So yeah, for me, WonderCon. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I was away for work somewhere. I was in a hotel, and I just got a one-line email. The first email just said, "Please send me the full manuscript." That was it. That was all it said. I was like, yeah, my first full manuscript, and then sent it off. And then a month later, no, I think it wasn't very long. It was maybe 6 weeks later, she kind of emailed me and said, I like it. It needs work, but I think we should meet and talk about it. I'd be interested in representing you.
And that's another thing that's wild to me. You met her in person.
Yeah. Have you not met your agent in person?
You don't have to here.
You don't have to, no.
It's so impractical because I live in California.
Yeah.
At the time she lived in New York, and now she lives in Michigan. And it's just, and in fairness, COVID partly participates in this. It's possible that there could have been maybe if I had flown to New York for my launch for the Ivies, maybe she would have flown to New York too.
Yeah.
But it literally just has not come up to meet her. So we've done video chat because I've interviewed her, not because that's normal either. Most people I know have not met their agents.
Wow.
Or editors. I haven't met my editor either. Yeah.
Okay.
My current editor. I met my previous editor at a conference.
Yeah.
But even that doesn't always happen.
Weird. I guess because the UK is smaller, we can do that kind of thing. I didn't have to.
That's kind of judging. Are you in Northern England?
So I'm near Birmingham, so kind of in the Midlands.
Yeah. That would be if I lived in upstate New York. Yeah, I would have gone down to New York at some point but exactly sure. I'm not gonna fly. Some people do. I say that. I know people who have flown to New York to meet their team, and I am not that is just no. Yeah, I'm too cheap and weird to do that. So, among other things.
So my friends do have agents in America, though, so they've never met them.
Yeah.
Because they've applied, the agencies, some are just US based, some are UK, and vice versa. I've got some American friends who've got agents in the UK, and they've never met them. I was just kind of lucky that she said,
I would love to. I hope we get along in person. We probably will.
You hope so. Yeah. Yeah.
We talk on the phone enough. It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I got lucky. It was good to sit down across the table from her and hash stuff out and kind of say, what was she thinking about the book? What her ideas for it, and just kind of go back and forth and get that immediate thing. Whereas you can send an email and go, well, what do you mean? What does that mean? And the way you can interpret an email, what does that mean? It's like, calm down. That's not what it is. There's no tone in email, and it's just so frustrating.
With editors now, and I always and I know a lot of writers are afraid of the phone, and I am too technically, but I love nothing more than a call after I get notes, because it's like, let's talk about it, because you get tone. And I've had things where I thought my editor was telling me to do something, and then we get on the phone, it's like, oh, you maybe only if you really want to, and they're so flexible and apologetic for even giving a note, and I'm like, oh well, now I feel bad that I don't want to do your note. So maybe that's part of the plan.
So a related question we had here for Angelina saying, do I have to live in the US to get my book published in the US? She's from Germany, but the book she's working on is in English. Short answer is no, as we just said. If you can find an agent that represents your genre wherever they are in the in the world, UK, America. We keep saying UK and America because most of the literary agents that I know are based there.
For the English-speaking world, there's a handful in Australia. The only major one I could think of, agency-wise, that is really relevant in the US would be Inkwell, because they do a ton of American publishing deals. But yeah, it's UK, US, a couple in Canada. Actually, let's give love to some of our Canadian friends. So.
Yes.
But not a ton. A lot of Canadian agencies do specialize more in UK Commonwealth rights than necessarily the US market. It depends. Yeah.
My friend Jeremy Zahl, who lives in Australia, his agent is up the road from me in the UK. I think he came over.
US Commonwealth. I meant UK Commonwealth.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he's met his agent once, just because he came over for an event anyway, and he was there. But otherwise, he'd never have met him. It's the other side of the world. So they send emails in the night constantly to each other, because it's just one's asleep, one's awake. There's always this delay of, send an email and you wait, and you send an email and you wait. So yeah, so no, you don't need to be in the same country. It's
and I have friends in Australia, South Africa, Singapore, who have published here. So they have US agents and they published in the US. And then I know some American authors who live in Germany and have been published in the US, but there are definitely individuals who have been living in one country and writing in English, even if it's not their primary language, who have totally gotten published. So as long as it fits the market, it doesn't matter, basically.
Yeah. This is it.
The main thing is bending to our market. We're terrible. Americans are terrible. I think about it sometimes. I'm like, it's kind of sad. So my Australian friend, she sends her books here because she has to if she wants to be published here. You kind of go, oh, we're kind of terrible. We demand supremacy. I like reading books that aren't set here, but a lot of the US reading market doesn't. It's interesting. I read it. I mean, though, mind you, I'm reading fiction set in the UK, published in the UK. So it's local to the UK. But I like reading that stuff, but not everyone does. It's interesting.
Yeah. It's some of the things that between the UK and the US have just some things that I take for granted and think of are the same in the US, and they're just not. There's just it's that thing of America to us basically feels like 50 different countries. Like when you start trying to make any kind of progress in there, or any kind of impact on on a book and getting it across, UK is fairly small, but it still takes time. But America, it's 50 new markets. It's just crazy.
Yeah. The big thing with the UK that I notice is like, because it's a small country, and you can tell reading the books, and it's just hilarious to me. It's like, well, I got on the train and I went like halfway across the country, and you're like, what? And I read one book that I still don't know why they did this. It did well in the UK, and when they published it here, they changed it. They made the whole book American, and I thought it was really weird, but you could tell that they didn't know what they were doing, because the UK book was set in a coastal area in the UK. I'm not sure where, but like a lot of coastal areas in the UK, it is a train ride to London. And so it's not a big deal to have your character. It would take a couple hours and they can get home.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen here. And they set it in coastal Massachusetts and just had this character, like, I think they had them go, it was either Boston or New York, but geographically speaking, but they made it a car. And it was just, I was like, no one would do that. Geographically, that makes no sense. And that's what, and it had other things in it that didn't make sense, where I was like, I think this is British. And I was right. And I was playing bingo. I was like, why did they just say put the kettle on? But it's just
little tick sheet of all the English things that you were spotting.
Well, I said it in my review that honestly the biggest giveaway is they reference some UK serial killers multiple times.
Right.
And it's said in a way where all the characters know who they are. And I was like, I have never heard of this couple. They are huge. I looked it up. They're hugely famous in the UK. They killed some kids. Like this, it was like a Bonnie and Clyde romance.
Okay.
Zero cultural context in the US for this case. So I was like, oh, these aren't Americans. You're trying to convince me this book is set here, but I know it's not. It was still a good book, but it kind of messed it up for me. It's like, yeah, I love murder in a good way. And I've never heard of this serial killing couple from the 90s or the 80s or 90s. Like this is off. Lost in translation kind of thing. So.
Yeah. There's definitely that sometimes.
Like so I would rather just read the UK book personally. I hope they stop doing that when they bring British books here. So. But it was a weird case because most of the time, maybe it's because I get them on NetGalley. I just get them from the UK publishers and I just read them the way they're meant to be.
Yeah. So speaking of editing, when you first started working with your agent, this is a professional. This is someone who knows the industry. How did you take their kind of feedback on revising the draft that you sent in? Like, how was that for you? Because I remember what it was like for me.
I'm pretty easygoing about edits. Asterisk. I always have a freak out, but I always have a freak out knowing I'm being a baby. Okay. But I think I come from fandom, so like I was used to having lots of beta readers, and mind you, not everyone in fandom edits their stuff, but I did. I had a beta reader who like was really harsh, and I was used to like. And actually, she legit taught me better grammar. She was like, you do this wrong. I was like, no, I don't. She's like, you do. You're wrong and you're stupid. But she said it nicely. So she was right and I was wrong. And like, so I had a thick skin. But by that same token, because also like I work well with CPs. I love CPs. I'm pretty chill in the sense that like, I know when to stand my ground and when to like do what they want. And so in fairness, so my first reaction was fine because my first editor didn't have me edit much because I revised that book multiple times, including to sell it. So by the time it was revised to sell, because I didn't sell on first round sub, she just didn't have a lot of edits. So I think I got off easy. My real first experience with an editor basically saying, you sent me a first draft, didn't you? I didn't cry. But I raged a lot. I was really upset. There's still things in that edit letter I have serious questions about that I didn't do. I was like, no. But then I got over it and I did the work. So it's fine.
It's tough. I found it tough the first time. So this is, I think, something else that's uncommon. I worked on the book for a year with my agent before we submitted it. And then we sent it off to Orbit, and they had a 7-day preview before it went on wide submission, and they basically said yes within that 7 days and took on the trilogy. But then of course it goes to my editor. My editor's right, and I get this huge long letter of all these things that I'm supposed to work on, but I get it from 2 editors, you see, because Orbit is UK and America, and they're also Australasia as well. So I had a US editor and UK editor. and they sort of combined.
Hard.
Well, they sort of combined their notes, but they didn't. And it wasn't that they were pulling in different directions, but it was like one would say something, and then the one would say something slightly different. And I'm like, okay, so who am I listening to? Where am I? You know, the next time they'd kind of made their notes one, but on that first book, it was a bit awkward because I felt very much in the middle. Like,
that's hard.
I don't know. So I'd go to my agent. That's the benefit of having your agent and go, what do I do? What happens? Who do I talk to about this? It's like, you talk to me. You talk to me.
I've not experienced that, and I don't know how I would handle that. Because exactly, I like that it's one editor, and this is another thing that I do. I'll just request a call. If I'm having feelings or I have questions, I love to get on the phone and just like brainstorm. Or I'll get on the phone with my agent if it's a book she's read to sanity check, where I'm like, here, you read this edit letter. I will tell you what I'm upset about, and you tell me whether or not I'm being rational. And we go from there. It's interesting. Yeah. And I sound really chill. And yeah, there have been small battles fought and both lost and won with my editor. I'm sure you've had that too. There's always like something where you're like, I had to give that up, and
So I think in one of my edits, it was for like the second book, my second book, Blood Mage. The editor sort of said, I don't see why this character needs to be there. Could you just merge it with this other character? And I was just, you know, I'd moved away from the keyboard and I was for like hours, and then I went back and thought, what? And I looked at what, and I thought, okay, what's she trying to get at? She thinks this character isn't important. And I looked back at the text and realized some of the stuff about the character was still in my head. It wasn't on the page. And I thought, okay, I have to make this character more prominent to make them more important, so I don't get that note, because to me, they're very important. And I beefed up the other character, and I didn't get that thing of, oh, can you merge it? The next kind of edit was, okay, that's fine. I can see why that person's there. They have more agency. She does more, this character now. Great, I get it. But it's that thing of, okay, what does the note mean? As opposed to just getting angry at the notes that I struggled with to begin with. It's just hard. It's so hard. You spend months and years working on something. And
that's why, like, because I'm so like practical about things, but I know some people are like, how does this not upset you when people are like, the control, you have an editor who tells you what to do? I was like, no, you just have to figure out what they actually want and then manipulate them into accepting what you want to do. Well, because it's your book.
Yeah.
So exactly, what are they saying? And you either agree and make the change, or you go, no, I'm gonna do this, so you can't give me that note anymore. And actually, I got that note twice on my current book. And the first time I was like, how dare? She was right. And I did it. I merged the function of two characters. But I actually technically kept the character. I just moved him into the background. But I gave a lot of his personality and function to one. And she wasn't wrong. I was like, oh, he doesn't have a motive for murder, so he can't be in the main cast. That's basically what it was. But then she wanted me to do it again. To like merge two more characters. I was like, no. She hadn't read the whole book, and I knew that like they both had important and literally opposite functions in Act 2. But that's the thing. I basically like I just didn't. I sent her the book. It was like, no, you'll see why. And then she agreed with me, and the compromise was changing one of their names. Because she had trouble telling people apart. I was like, okay, we'll change someone's name. But no, I'm not getting rid of this character. I'm not merging them. They're completely different people. Like, to me, they're real people. I was like, she would never. How dare you? Amber would never.
Yeah. It's standing some battles I've turned around and said, no, I think this is really important. And they've gone, okay. Because at the end of the day, everything they're making are just suggestions. That's the thing that some people don't realize about traditional publishing, is that what they're saying is what they believe will make the book better. But if it diverts, but if it diverts from your vision of the book, you can turn around and say, no, that's changing it too much from what I think the book should be.
And I talked about it. My ending on my last book, that was a battle. I won. Kind
of. Okay. Can you say what it was without spoiling the ending?
Yeah,
like what they wanted.
Well, so the first ending was a happy ending.
Okay.
I knew they wanted to change it before they bought the book. I agreed. The unhappy ending I delivered wasn't exactly, from a pacing perspective, they didn't like it. I was sad. My editor was like, okay, we'll get a second opinion, but if they agree with me, you have to rewrite it. I lost. But what I did, I basically took the spirit of what I wanted. I kept all of that. I rewrote it, but I still made it what I wanted. And then from there on, I refused to make, like, I made changes, but I wouldn't change the spirit of the ending. It's an unhappy ending. And that's what and like, I say this like it was dramatic. Like, now my editor is like, that was the right move. But in the moment, it's not a very YA ending. And I think that's why it was like, what? And some readers hate it. But the important thing is that you like it, because then you have to live with your choices.
Well, this is it. You've got to live with that. Someone else will read the book once, maybe twice, and put it on the shelf, or they have it from the library, and that's it. It lives with you for the rest of your life.
You have to live with that choice.
Yeah.
And then the same thing, like, I guess I just have problems with endings. So do you also, like, agonize over your endings? I feel like it's an author thing. Where, like, did I make the right choice? Some people hate epilogues. I like them, so I live with those choices. I have 2 books with epilogues, and some people hate that. I'm like, fight me. I like them. So isn't that what matters? I don't know.
Prologues, that's the other thing. Some people hate prologues.
Some people hate them.
They're like, if it's that important, make it chapter 1. Why does it need to be a prologue? I'm like, it depends. It really depends on the book.
Yeah, well, and some people, so the Ivies has a prologue, and some people don't like it, but I'm like, it's literally like 5 paragraphs. You'll live. And that's actually a thing where I didn't have a strong feeling about the prologue, but my editor did. And I was like, I'm not going to fight that. Whatever. If you wanted to have a prologue, fine. You're my editor, whatever. And I partly did that so I could fight other battles. That's the other suggestion. Give them a lot of what they want, and then fight for the things that matter, but in a nice way, so they still like you.
Here's an interesting question we had from Delora. She's saying, how would editors feel about, she has dyslexia, and even though she uses a lot of resources, she's constantly worried that she'll miss something that are obvious to others.
A lot of writers have dyslexia, or they have things like ADHD that definitely impact their writing. And for the most part, for what I've found, if an agent is editorial, they expect to help on an extra level with that editorial, and I find that they don't mind most of the time. There are some who do, and then you wouldn't want to work with them. And sometimes that is trial and error. I've only known one case, one friend, where that caused not that specific situation, but there were some issues with the agent didn't want to do that level of editorial on the writing. But like, for example, my agent has a background, like, she did copy editing for a while. She happily copy edits my manuscripts, and never minds if I like mess something up like egregiously. So like, for the most part, they will work with you, and actually publishers too. Like, you'd be amazed. Like, not every writer like writes clean, perfect prose. I have found that the accommodations are there and they do exist. Obviously, that's not universal. But another reason to carefully choose your agent, because they will know, like, they will submit you to editors who aren't going to be dicks, basically. But you'd be surprised how many authors you love have accommodations in place because they have dyslexia too, or ADHD, or whatever they have. It's obviously not all sunshine and roses, but I don't want any author to count themselves out because of something like that.
Yeah. Christina said that she gets her husband to beta read for him. So that's a really good idea.
Person, exactly. Yeah. And some people do have that CP who line edits for them, like really helps them catch those things. I do know people who have those people in their life who do that for them. In extreme cases, you can also, if you want, hire an editor. I don't always advocate that, but some people prefer to. It's a lot less stressful to pay someone a couple $100 to do that kind of edit for them. So
yeah, because you're not asking
that.
It's that thing of, if you're not sure, you're not paying someone to do such a dense thing. You're doing them to just do it's a cheaper alternative than a structural edit, which is a lot more detailed. It's just kind of pick out these things that I'm probably going to be missing.
Yeah.
Oh, Duke of Denver says that the prologue in the Ivies was fantastic. Kicked off the book to a
Oh,
running
okay.
start. There
Thank
you
you.
go. See? Some
Thank you.
people love them.
And I said it in a video recently. The reason that exists is because that was originally an info dump in a different part of the book. So I also am like, not everyone likes it, but it fixed a pacing issue. And it doesn't create a pacing issue just sitting in it's like 5 paragraphs. It's nothing. It's like, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's a question for you. What kind of stuff didn't you realize about until you got into traditional publishing? What kind of stuff did you work out once you were kind of in the machine that came apparent to you?
A really stupid one. And I love to occasionally blow minds with this one, because some people don't believe me, and it's not every publisher, but they would literally care if you repeat a word. The detail oriented nature of specifically line and copy edits with certain anal retentive editors honestly surprised. I'm happy about it, but I was surprised. Literally, my editor will count the number of times I use certain words, and then she gives me a list and she's like, fix it.
Wow.
There are also certain words I'm only allowed to use once in a manuscript, if at all.
I can guess what those are.
The last content phrases. The last one was the elephant in the room. I was only allowed to use one. Oh, I also had a metaphor about being parched in the desert, and I used one that was similar, and I had to pick one. Like a copy editor caught that. A copy editor was literally like, your metaphors are similar, just worded differently. Pick one. It's mind blowing, but like it makes the writing better. But I didn't realize how anal retentive some publishers were. But that is like, from what I can tell, that is a thing at Random House. I've talked to other Random House authors. They're like, yeah, they do that to me too. I think it's just part of what they do. My editor at HMH, my second editor, did that. She called them echoes, but it wasn't something I found in the copy editing process necessarily. So it's just different publishers. And then, yeah, the number of people who touch my book blew my, like, where you know something consciously, but until you go through it, you're like, oh, 8 or 12 people worked on the Ivies. And I was like, I would just like get something back and I was like, there's a new set of initials in the comments. I don't know what their name is, but clearly they brought in another person. I was like, how many people are working on this book? It's cool.
Well, here's something I didn't realize. So an agent likes your work, they pick it up, they pitch it to an editor likes your work and you pick it up. But that's not the end of the story at all. The editor has to sell the book internally to other people at the publisher before they actually get the thumbs up.
Yeah.
So even if they think, oh, this book is brilliant, they have to kind of go around the office and win their boss, win like the accountant over and the financer. And because it's that thing, if you go in with something that's so radically different and there's no mold for it, then they don't know if it's going to sell one book or a million copies. Whereas if you can go into the publisher and the editor can say, I've got this new book from Stephen, it's a bit like X and Y. They can go and do their calculations and work out roughly where they think it will sell with a bit of leeway. And then based upon that, they can calculate the advance. And based upon that, like release schedules, where would it sit in the list? So I knew that publishing was business. I knew that it was there to make money for the publisher. But at the same time, it's a creative project. We're selling stories to people. And it's that balance in my mind that I still struggle with, even though I studied business at university. It's creative and business, and it always has to be there in your mind. And I think some writers just go in with a creative bit and they kind of forget about the business side that you need to have. And
it can be brutal. Actually, jumping off of that, it did surprise me when I originally found it out. A literary agent said it on a panel that specifically the comp titles that you and your agent choose to submit with can impact whether they buy it and how large your advance is, because they're running the numbers on comp titles specifically. And I was like, oh, that's upsetting on some level, because exactly, like, if you're unlucky enough to comp to something that didn't sell very well, you can actually shoot yourself in the butt. But that's hard. That's a facet of it that is mind-blowing. And the other thing that I guess, similarly, I knew that you had to get through acquisitions, etc. But yeah, when I discovered through personal experience that some publishers just don't like sci-fi, And then that is all they have to say in an acquisitions meeting, and your book is dead. I'm not the only one who's gone through this, but there was a publisher, and I went to acquisitions, and that was literally it. Sales and marketing don't think sci-fi sells, and it was dead. And it just literally, it didn't matter that the editor liked it and her boss liked it. Book was dead.
Wow.
I warned people about this particular publisher, not in a bad way, and they have published sci-fi, but they don't think it sells well, and you are less likely to be acquired at that particular imprint because of it, because the sales and marketing team have very fixed, firm opinions on it, and you can't change their mind. Of course, I say chicken and egg. Does it not sell as well because you're not marketing it well? Or did you pay too high of an advance for that book that bombed? I have so many. Of course, I have feelings about YA advances, period. Adult SFS is healthier. Much
really better. Okay. Are they not very good in YA?
Well, no, they overpay for books all the time and then are shocked Pikachu face when they don't sell very much. Like, you should never expect a YA sci-fi to sell. I mean, even 20,000 copies would be high, but you should expect it to sell about 10,000 copies. And I'm not saying authors shouldn't be paid well, but don't pay $500,000 for a YA sci-fi. You're just shooting yourself in the foot. At least now that we're out of the dystopian market, that's just like, duh. Like, I could tell you that book wasn't going to meet expectations. And I'm actually not even thinking of a specific book. I just pulled 500K out of my butt.
Yeah.
But like, and that just actually kind of sucks, because then it's like, well, if you're a YA sci-fi writer, you have to accept that you will just get paid less for your work, but your career will be healthier if you're paid less for your work. It's a catch-22. Generally, not just sci-fi. It is healthier to get a lower advance, but what sucks is advances play into marketing. And I saw someone ask about marketing, so maybe we talk about marketing. But I've heard that adult science fiction and fantasy don't pay to debuts, especially bloated, ridiculous advances, and then expect you to sell 500,000 copies with no marketing. And that happens in YA all the time. They're like, what do you mean it didn't sell? We didn't market it. You're not a bestseller? What? Yeah.
So Raven
I
asks,
still traditional publishing. I don't want to scare anyone.
Raven's
But
asks,
I've seen publishers be ridiculous.
do agents, not publishers, do any marketing for your book? What marketing can the author do before release?
That's a really interesting question, actually. Kind of brings up feelings for me.
So
some agents do, and I don't think that should be an expectation. And I actually hate that some agents do. I have literally seen this impact agents I know and care about, including my own, because it's created this situation where a lot of authors will gravitate toward the splashy agent or agency who promises marketing support, or the agent's a celebrity themselves, and that's part of the online celebrity, and that's part of the allure. But it really screws over agents. It is not their job to market your book, and it's actually completely ridiculous, the idea that an agent would market your book. I mean, it's slightly ridiculous that we have to market our books. Some do, but I would say be wary. I think trading off the celebrity of your agent is not the soundest idea. It doesn't always forge the best career start necessarily. But I also, I just have feelings about Sharky agents. So that's just me having bias.
So the promotion that the agents do really is when you're working with the agent and you're revising this is before they've sold it, before they've, approached any kind of publisher, they'll be warming up the editors. So they'll be talking to them, and this is the kind of marketing that they do behind the scenes that you don't really see.
Exactly.
So they're they're talking to a bunch of people. They might be talking to an agent about their existing clients and saying, "Oh, so and so's doing this and doing that," and then they say, "Oh, I'm working with this guy or this girl. They've got this great new book. It's about this, this, and this." And the editor will be like, "Oh, that sounds cool," and they're putting it in the back of their mind. So 6 months later, when your draft is ready, and the agent goes, "Here you go," and they go, "Oh yeah, I remember you said that." So it's that kind of marketing that they would do, but they can't actually go out and sell the book for you. They can support you. So my agent as part of an agency. And if I tweet something about the book, she'll retweet it. Or if I post something, she'll repost it. But you can't do anything about before the book comes out. And then the publisher will do ARCs, advanced reading copies. You can do that kind of thing. You can start building connections before the book comes out. Talk to YouTubers, booktubers who, you know, do reviews. See if you can send them digital advanced reading copies for a fair review. There's NetGalley, all this kind of stuff. But it's hard before the book comes out.
That said, if you're traditionally published, don't take all that on yourself. Push back on your publisher. That is actually literally their job to do all of that. And they should do it. Will they? I don't know, but they should. So, and like generally, especially as a YouTuber, you're going to get way farther with your publisher putting your book on NetGalley and maybe sending a widget to YouTubers than you reaching out personally anyway. So they really should do that for you. Yeah, I find in terms of stuff you can do, it sucks on a certain level, but just being present on social media, you're never really going to move the needle, and don't let publishing gaslight you into thinking it's your job to be the most amazing person on social media in order to sell your books. But having some kind of presence, it's a good thing to do, just so that readers have a way to find you. It also helps you interact with book media and sometimes booksellers, but definitely book bloggers or reviewers, and that can sometimes help. So
yeah, even when you get a publisher and they're promoting your book, unless you're one of the really kind of lead titles, their budgets are limited. It's not like the good old days when they could hire out huge venues and have launch parties. They don't really have launch parties for the bigger ones, perhaps. But
I wish. That would be a dream, just like in the movies, having a launch party
with a cake and like champagne, and everyone's walking around in like little black dress.
Yeah, those scenes. That's not real. That's not real. Although, actually, maybe people in New York could get that. I don't know, but not little old me.
Steve's asked, what's the best advice you can give to maximize your chances of hooking a literary agent and after that a publisher? Don't be funny. Don't try and be funny. That's my best piece of advice.
Yeah, in the query, yeah.
Yeah, don't be creepy. Don't be weird. Don't try and be their best friend. Proofread everything 100 times. Get your friend to read it. You want to give them as few excuses as them to delete your email and go on to the next one. If you don't follow the submission guidelines, if you don't read and find everything else about them, like if their name is Joan and you put, Dear Jim, delete, they'll move on. They haven't got time. You know, Dear Sir / Madam, delete, move on. They have hundreds of emails. You want to give them as few excuses as possible so that they focus purely on the work. That's what that's my bit of advice.
Well, and this isn't very helpful to necessarily lit fic writers and so on, but honestly, in this market, my advice here, you need to be as ruthlessly commercial as humanly possible, meaning you have to know your market. Make sure what you're writing, and this is also at the drafting level, what you've chosen to write is on target. It doesn't mean write to market, but it means don't write something that you know is probably not going to sell. And then give it a sexy title that's perfect for your genre. It's going to catch their attention. Hone your pitch so that opening line of your query hits them in the face. And if your comps are really sexy with your pitch, start the query with that. Like, there are different ways to write a query. And exactly, like, that query is sharp. Your character, your conflict, and your stakes are really compelling. They're really clear. And then your first pages are perfect. So for me, I think it's that combination of like, yeah, the writing's great, but great writing doesn't matter if they don't think they can sell it. So you have to know what they can sell and like hit it. I always feel bad because it's like, I'm an aggressively commercial writer, so this is very easy for me to do. And I feel bad because like, it doesn't mean don't write a quiet book or don't write literary fiction or don't write historical, but like, I'm so calibrated for like, what's the elevator pitch? How can I how can I make it not only they can see the cover and they can see the book on the shelf, but they can pitch it to a film agent. That's just what I like doing. If you can do that, because it does make it easier. You have to make it so they can see the cover. that's actually one of my favorite things, which is why I say don't sleep on titles. A hot title can make a huge difference.
Yeah, you've got to know your market. You've got to know your genre. If you're not reading within the genre that you're writing, I'd wonder why.
Yep.
You need to know what's. I mean, you shouldn't chase a wave. Like, I always pick this because it's an easy thing to say. Like Sparkly Vampires, they had a big surge and all the rest of it. You wouldn't write one of those books now because it just wouldn't sell.
Well, now you can write vampires, but you have to subvert the tropes and give a fresh. They're coming back slowly, not in a big way, but it has to be fresh. And honestly, right now that means exactly you cannot write Robert Pattinson Sparkly Vampires anymore. It cannot be that classic paranormal romance arc. People are basically like deconstructing vampires now in YA specifically, or they're doing queer vampires. Like it has to be something that is exactly nothing like a book that could have been released in 2008. And that's recent. Vampires were dead until like 18 months ago. And we'll see how long they last. But I'm glad to see something coming back. But you still can't sell dystopian as far as I know. I think that's still dead. I think. But you can trick them. That's the way to sell. I did that. My debut was very obviously dystopian, and I just tricked them by not saying it. And it's fine. I mean, it's because I packaged it as because it was Jane Eyre. So this thing, I went heavily on the retelling part rather than this is post-apocalyptic part, because you have to know your market. You have to know what's going to send them running, screaming in the opposite direction. So.
Yeah. If you try to take something to an agent that's so radically different, that's a really hard sell. There are some agents that just won't touch it because they don't know what to do with it. There's some that might take it on, but equally, there's still no guarantee that it would sell. I mean, I've said this a few times. A full manuscript request is great from an agent. It's a brilliant first step. Getting an agent itself is amazing, but it's only just another step on the road. I did an interview with a friend of mine, Andrea Stewart, and her book debut came out last year, The Boneshard Daughter, which people keep thinking is YA because one of the characters is sort of a teen. It's not, but she's like, okay. But that was her, I think it was like her third novel. So she'd been with, it's the same agent as me, actually. She'd been with that agent for almost the same amount of time as me. And they'd worked on a book, sent it out, and it just didn't take off for whatever reason. Did another book, worked on it, sent out, nothing. And then the third one is the one that, but it took years. So getting an agent is a massive step. Getting a book out is a massive step, but it's only just the beginning.
Then you have to sell more books.
Getting published is really hard. Staying published, that
harder.
Is the challenge.
And I always I feel bad saying that, and I try to be careful because it's always like the grass is greener, and it's like, saying that to a querying writer, they're like, how dare you? I would give my right arm to be where you are. I was like, yes, and I accept that. But also, what do you prefer? Yeah, you get an agent, maybe you get a publishing deal, but what if that's the only book you ever get to publish? For some people, that's enough. Yep. But meaning I am far more concerned with how do you stay published? And it's really hard because once you debut, depending on how you do, it's almost like you're starting from zero in some cases again, and you have to prove again and again and again they need to publish you. You're great. And again, be aggressively commercial. That's how I do it.
You're only as good as your last book. As soon
you're
as that
only
book,
as good as your next book.
Yeah, because that book comes out and people go, "Oh, it's brilliant. When's the next one coming out?" And you're like, I just spent 2 years working on this, and you've read it in a week or less. When's the next one?
It's pitch. Does the pitch sound good to them? You have to sell them on a snippet, a pitch.
That's tough. Here's a question. I kind of
enjoy the challenge.
Why is the success of the superhero movie genre not translated to publishing, like YA did with Harry Potter?
I'm on record as having many salty opinions about this. And people argue with me all the time. Though I will say, the thing is, Harry Potter was a book first, so that's actually not a good comparison. There weren't magic school movies that then created a trend in publishing. It was the other way around. And generally speaking, the medium of novels has always functioned separately from the medium of film and TV. There have always been things that have been huge in film and TV that just never translate really to the novel market. Superheroes is a big one. I think it's because it's a visual medium. I think it's because comic books exist and they're great and you don't need to replace them. And the people who like comic books are not going to necessarily read a novel. And people who read novels aren't necessarily going to read comic books. I speak for myself. Like, not that I'm the be all end all. I love superhero movies. I don't read comics. And even though I've written a superhero YA, I don't really want to read them. And actually, I have to kind of examine that within myself. I'm like, wait, you're a hypocrite. That said, I do have theories for YA specifically. I cannot speak for adult. I think, again, I think superheroes intersect with sci-fi. And I think YA doesn't know how to market it. I think that's, so they go, it doesn't sell because they haven't figured out how to sell it. So they won't buy more. I think it's a cycle. I also think a lot of the books they have purchased, not all, but a lot, just repeat the same formulas as comic books and movies, and those already exist. And they do it better, so you don't need it. It's the same like downtrodden dude who just wants to be special and finds out he's special. We have seen superpower YA sold as fantasy, and it's more like, and it's been like, so for example, Red Queen is a superhero book, but it wasn't promoted that way. The workaround there was made it magic and made it a romance. So I think that you have to always go to the genre conventions, and YA just supports certain kinds of novels. This is all pet theories. I'm not the end all be all, but generally YA doesn't do well with adventure fiction, and I feel like that's what most superhero stories are. They kind of arc that way. This is I don't know. All I can tell you is repeatedly they sell very, very poorly. I've looked up the numbers. They don't sell as well as you think they do. And so publishers just don't want to waste the money on it. I don't know.
Superheroes are basically, like, some people I know look down their nose at the superhero movies and make fun of them, and like some are very literary and snotty and sort of, and I've just kind of pointed out to say that they're essentially a modern day version of Greeks and myths and legends, going back to Greek and Roman and beyond, which is people with big names doing big things and fighting monsters. You know, you go back and look at all the myths and you got the same thing. It's just a modern day version. Comics are a modern day version of the same kind of stories. American comics, you know, people with fantastic names and strange powers, and they use the same symbols. Like one of the DC characters, the Flash, the original Flash has the kind of helmet with Hermes wings. I mean, it's right there. It's right there on the character. And then they're like, oh, it's ridiculous. I'm like, do you know your history? Do you know your ancient history? You can see this is a modern retelling. It's adapted for a new audience, the same kind of thing. But with fantasy, they don't have the kind of flashy clothes, but they have the big adventures and they have the monsters that they fight. But it's a difficult, I don't know. The genre, the mediums are very different. Nowadays, comics are essentially cheap R&D for every other medium. That's how the mouse uses them. Yeah. That's why they bought a bunch of companies like Marvel.
I have a lot of feelings about what's happened and going on. And I'm not like I did love the Archie comics. That's my flavor of comic. But like, so meaning I'm not like in the comic book industry, but exactly some of the things like where it's like, oh, they literally will publish graphic novels just to launch franchises, which is actually, that happens with books too. Which is interesting. Yeah, I agree though, but I think that you're right. They're epic stories. I think they just work so well as films and comic book / graphic novels. I think those mediums are perfect for those stories. It's not that they can't work as novels, they just don't as often. Or make it something else, make it fantasy. Like, and yeah. That's my thought on it.
Okay. Here's a question we had from earlier, but it's a different kind of segue. Talking about, if a book's traditionally published in the UK, will it be available in other countries too? And how does it work? So do you have foreign rights for your books?
It's been interesting. So my first two, we sold only US and select territory rights in English to HMH, my US publisher. So we got a separate publisher for the UK and Commonwealth excluding Canada. So I'm published by Titan in the UK.
Yes.
And so that was my literary agent retaining those rights, putting it on submission in the UK through a co-agent. Um, oh, I'm blanking, but it's like it's a what decently well-known UK agency who's the co-agent.
Yep.
And so we sold there. And I'll tell you, I almost didn't sell in the UK. Titan, I think it was the second or third round. A lot of them said no because a lot of UK publishers preference, it makes sense to me, UK authors. And I'm American, but my character was British. So hopefully that's why we got through. But also we got pushed back on the sci-fi. Sci-fi, guys, sci-fi. Which is why I have no foreign editions for my first two books at all. I did not sell in a single foreign market. They all said, we don't want American sci-fi. And I wasn't a bestseller or anything. Yeah, it hurt. But actually, similarly, for the Ivies, so for the Ivies, we sold World English to Penguin Random House because it's Penguin Random House. And there's a Penguin Random House in Australia, and there's a Penguin Random House in the UK, and their distribution is great worldwide. So they just have our World English rights. It made sense to give them to them. And my agency has and is subbing the Ivies for foreign, so for translations. And it just hasn't sold anywhere yet. Because again, I say apparently, I know it's true. I wrote a very American book, and not a lot of thrillers sell in foreign markets in YA. Okay. And I wrote something super American. I still hold out hope that someday I will have a foreign edition, but I am a traditionally published author who does not have a single foreign edition of her books. And I feel honestly lucky that I sold in the UK at all on the first two. But because it's Penguin Random House, I am published in the UK through them.
Yeah.
So that's how it worked for me. But that's partly, I think, genre and partly what I write. I have friends who write fantasy who have sold a bunch of foreign editions because the market's like YA fantasy. So it just differs. But I know people who have not sold in the UK and it burns them up inside. So I do feel fortunate that I sold there at all. So there has to be a market. And you guys have your own authors and you have your own publishers.
We do. Yeah. So we should say that what it means is, so I sold my first trilogy to Orbit, and because they're UK and US, they had worldwide English rights, which means they get to sell the book anywhere in the world in English. So in any country that has an English language bookshop, Orbit can sell my book there. They're allowed to. Some UK publishers of sci-fi and fantasy, because that's my market, don't have a US equivalent. So just as you said, you got Titan in the UK, Gollancz is a big publisher in the UK of sci-fi and fantasy, but they don't have a US branch. So what they tend to do is do a co-agent thing, like you said. So Gollancz would work with, say, Orbit in the US or Door or someone else, and they will print and publish that book in English in America. So my UK editions are like this size, and my US editions are this size. Yeah. And the paper quality is different, and the cover's the same, but it just... It feels a little bit different. Yeah.
I prefer UK books. I've always preferred the quality.
They're just a bit neater. I just find them.
I still have all my UK editions of, well, not all of them. I couldn't get all of them, but my Jasper Fforde books, I have a lot of UK editions of those. And all my Harry Potters are UK edition. And my Bridget Jones. Those are all UK books. Well, because I was living in the UK when some of those came out. But so it's I prefer them. Yeah.
And the way it works with foreign overseas is that my agent will go to a couple of events each year. So there's a Frankfurt Book Fair and the London Book Fair. And essentially she sits at a table and has 15 to 20-minute meetings with, it's like speed dating with editors from foreign publishers. So France, Germany, Spain, she sits down and she'll kind of pitch her list to them. Well, this is the book, this is how many units it's sold, this is what it's about. And they do it. And then some will say, yeah, we'll send us a copy, and then they read it. If they like it, they buy it, and then you'll get a separate advance, a separate contract. So my first trilogy was published in French, German, and Russian.
That's the dream. Someday. Someday.
So it meant I had a totally separate contract with France and a separate advance and a separate one with Germany.
Covers, and it's like cover
roulette. Oh, I'll show you them later.
Are great, and some are not. But then you go, well, clearly those covers work in that market, so it doesn't matter. I won't say the country, but there is a country that is semi-notorious in my little friend circle for having really kind of hideous covers because multiple of them got them, but they work in the market. And
this is it. They know what sells. That publisher knows that this kind of flashy cover works in this country. So yeah, you'll get a new contract, a new advance, sales, and then you get, you know, royalties if you clear out your advance. So I went to a French festival. I was invited. That was amazing for like 3 or 4 days. I sat at tables signing books to people in, but I had to have a stack of post-its and be like, can you write your name down? Sorry, I don't have to spell that. That's what I had to do for like 4 days. How do you spell that? Can you write it down, please?
So my dream is selling in Germany because I speak German. I really want a German edition, and I want to go to Germany because
I'll show you my German copy later.
Yeah.
They knew what would work.
And even like my second book, I wrote a German princess, and I still do not have a German edition. It's fine. It's fine. We're fine. Someday,
we're all right. We're okay.
I'll be famous, and they'll publish my back catalog. Yeah. There's even German in my second book. I wrote parts of it in German.
Okay.
Yeah, and by the way, no one was available to copy edit that for me, so I had to be correct. So that was fun.
Oh no.
Oh yeah. So fun fact: if you write in another language in your book, they don't copy edit that. So you better be correct.
You better get it right. You really better get it right.
Anytime there's French in my books, that's my editor, because I do not speak French, and I've had to say to her, like, if you want French in this, you have to certify that it is correct, because I don't speak that. And so there's French in the Ivies because she wanted it, and I was like, fine, I don't care. So, yeah. Like in her mind, she was like, this character probably takes AP French. I was like, sure, I don't care. I just don't speak it, so
sure,
it's fine. Sure.
So how have you found writing during the last 18 months? You know, what's it been like for you?
It's been interesting. So I went through this whole thing where I used to write at home exclusively for the first couple of books. And then once I sold on contract and I was writing on contract, it's like I hit a wall and I started writing outside the home. And then in the pandemic, I had to like figure out how to write at home again. That was fun. And I got through the first 9 months of it not having to draft. I edit. I found generally editing wasn't too horrifically impacted for me. There's something about the mindset of it that I could still do it even with all of this stress. Drafting was a nightmare. Yeah, it took forever. I had trouble with focus. I think it impacted the book itself. Like it was already about grief, and now it's like it's a pretty depressing book, I think, which is interesting. It's still a romp, but it's also very upsetting because it's like, I mean, I started it. So my second YA thriller, the girl's mother died the same way my mom died, and when I started, it was about that. But then we had a pandemic, so I got to write it while also having my anxiety through the roof, and so like that's just all in it. I think it'll make it a really interesting book. Yeah, and mostly it's that concentration's been really, really hard for me. I don't know about you, and so everything took longer, and I've had to get more extensions than I ever have in my life, repeated extensions. And I still have no clue if this is a good book. But it doesn't matter. It's going to be published. So I ran out of time. In order to meet my publishing season, it was just like what I turned in 2 weeks ago. That's the book. It has to be copy edited and stuff. But like, I can't make any serious. I hope it's okay. Yeah.
I definitely struggled as well. And I mean, so it took me a lot longer than usual, I think. I'm usually good. I set myself targets. I keep to the targets. I progress. I get word counts done. But it was just more of an effort. And it was more of an effort not to start writing about the things outside. So my book wasn't particularly dark, but I could feel things trickling in. And I'm like, okay, I get why I'm doing this and understand it mentally, but I've got to try and separate it from the story. And that's kind of hard when, you know, it's fantasy, it's not this world, but it's still a kind of reflection of this world because fantasy always is. And I'm like, okay, I'm not writing about the pandemic, but I need to kind of step away from that. And that mental separation was just really a struggle. It just made everything a lot more difficult for me.
Yeah. And we started seeing books come out that were written during the early part of it, and I think you can feel it in a lot of the books, at least the ones I've read. But I also read thrillers, so in fairness, an oppressive, tense, anxious environment might make thrillers better. But like I read Rock Paper Scissors by Alice Feeney, and I was like, she wrote this in quarantine, and it felt it's an isolation trope thriller, which I love, and it felt delightfully oppressive. I was like, oh, I feel so stressed. It's great.
We have had some brilliant things come out though from this pandemic. Like, I don't know if you've seen the BBC drama like Staged, which David Tennant and Michael Sheen. Have you seen that?
Made it over here yet, which means they'll probably sell it to a streamer, and
it'll be on like BBC America, I think, or something. And it's the two of them. It's all like, you know, pseudo real, but in the story they were going to do this play and now they can't. So they rehearse it online with the producer, and they're kind of slightly caricatured versions of themselves, but they're trapped at home and they're talking on Zoom the whole time. And the whole thing is just on Zoom. And it is so well done, and it's so well written. It's hilarious. And it's David Tennant. And Michael Sheen's like just there, and he's like, what is it, Michael? And it's like, the birds, they're gathering on the trees. And it's just like, well, what? It's hilarious. And they got all sorts of stuff happens, and then they want to do like an American version of Staged for season 2, and like, so who's going to play you, David? Oh, I don't know. They're talking about this actor and that one, and it's brilliant. It's one of the best things I've seen, because it's not ignoring the pandemic, it's not ignoring what's happened, but it's using it in a different way and just telling funny stories about it, and stuff like that has kept me buoyed up through this period.
You write fantasy, so you don't have to worry about incorporating this into your books. That is like front of mind for me. And a lot of people aren't happy. Like, I mention it in the Ivies factually incorrectly because I thought it wouldn't be this bad but it's in there. I actually removed a mention of it from this next book for a good reason. My editor was like, it'll open you up better for a sequel if you're not specific about how a person died, which is the whole thing. But it's going to be in my next one for sure, because it's just like it happened, so now we have to kind of reflect that reality. It's very strange. Yeah.
We have a fan. Isabel said Stage is excellent. Yeah, it was so good, so funny. If you can see it, watch it. It's brilliant. But yeah, it's been tough. It's been tough.
I hope, but the thing is, I don't know if you feel this way. I'm like, well, at least I know I can write a book this way, because this probably isn't going to end anytime soon. I mean, I don't know what it's like in the UK, but like in California, obviously we can go out a little, but for the most part, like at least professionally, like I'm not going back to the office until at least January. So
right, okay.
Happily, my company's very cautious. They really like appreciate that like employees probably don't want to go back. So we don't have to go back until January. And so Mini's just like, well, I can be creative in this environment. That's nice. Just takes 4 times as long. So yeah.
We have an interesting question here. How do you land IP work within publishing? Would you talk to your agent?
That's the best way I know. And I know a lot of people who do IP. And so essentially the best IP opportunities funnel through agents, because editors and publishers will reach out to agents they like working with, who they know represent best-selling talent. Not that you have to be best-selling. My friends who do IP are not best-selling, but they know that they attract talented authors. So they tend to offer them the audition opportunities first. Not always. There are some packagers who you can go to directly. There are just fewer of them, and it's a little opaque. But that's typically like, so it's actually kind of that it can suck. You basically have to get an agent who thinks they can sell a book for you first. And regardless of whether that sells on sub, that can be how you'll get your foot in the door for IP. And I know multiple people who weren't able to sell their debut with their agent, but then auditioned for and got IP instead and debuted with that. So you do have to get in the pipeline. Because like the packager I know of who used to allow auditions of unagented authors, Glasstown, I don't know if I'm less familiar if they're still doing that, because the people I know who used to work there don't work there anymore. So that's convoluted. But I can also tell you there are more packagers and publishers doing IP than ever before in YA, specifically in Kidlit, YA middle grade. A shocking majority of things selling nowadays are packaged. So yeah. So the hard part's getting an agent. But if you want to do IP, that can actually really help your career. Being open to IP can save your career, in fact.
Yeah. A couple of my friends have done licensed work. A friend of mine's got like a Marvel, a novel coming out, novelization, and the publisher is open, but only to agented authors, so you can contact them. So she's got a sort of Asgard book coming out about Sif and the Valkyrie, I think is Lady Sif and the Valkyrie.
That's cool.
That's coming out, so she's done that. There's a thing called Warhammer, which is all kind of like the gaming and it's like, but again, it's a licensed thing, and I think they accept submissions from agented authors. You can contact them, and then if they do novellas, they do digital books, they do all that kind of stuff, and then maybe novels later on. And a friend of mine's done like 15 novels for them at this point. He's just done, in addition to his other stuff, he's become known for that. So he's really popular with them.
What they love, what they look for, it's actually, I haven't done IP because I honestly don't think I can do it. And it's actually the same reason I don't self-publish. They like writers who write quickly, cleanly, and then are a dream to work with in terms of editing. That wouldn't be a problem for me, but I cannot write fast. Write quickly to an outline. My personal biggest hangup is I have no clue if I can write to an outline. I literally don't know if I can. And in IP, that's kind of important because it's their idea. So exactly, I have friends where like they can turn around a draft in 8 to 12 weeks, and that is gold in IP.
Yeah. It's the deadlines can be tough, but also you have to write within constraints. So that's the other thing. Like, so my friend who's writing the Marvel book, like, you can't just go, I'm going to kill this character off and do that and do that. Which Disney/Marvel,
they are the strictest I've heard, but they also like they're very clear with what they want for the most part. So like you work closely with them.
It can be useful as well though. Like they can give you a framework, so you kind of know where you can and can't step outside of, so that can be quite
and
quite
on the
fun.
Fun side, you sign NDAs, and so I guess I'm not technically supposed to know this, but you get to read like the scripts and stuff for the movies that aren't out, which is cool. I mean, that's not actually secret, but I know people who have gotten to do that, and I'm probably not supposed to know that they have. That's what I mean. I'm not telling.
I don't know this.
Cool. But I think it's cool because like if you get hired to write a prequel or sequel, you get to, and the movie's not out. And usually timing wise, the movie's not out because they try to time them and publishing takes forever. Kind of cool. And you get to like set up the backstory for characters. I think that's cool.
That's wicked. I'd love to be able to know some of this stuff ahead of time.
I know, right? My thing is, and I've told my agent that my main thing is I don't know if I can write fast enough, but also I'm not attached to any property strongly enough to want to write IP for it. And because it is like authorized fan fiction, I'm like, I want those opportunities to go to people who bleed for those things. I don't even want to audition for something if I don't want to die for it.
I don't know. Some things I'd kill to write for.
That's the thing. And like, so, and it's mostly just because like, if this had been me like 15 years ago, I would have killed someone to write a Buffy book. But now I'm so far removed from it that I would be the worst person to write it. So, I mean, yeah, just fascinating. Because I used to write Buffy fan fiction. So
yeah, me too. Yeah, Buffy and Angel fanfic, and I did like a Firefly fanfic story one time.
Oh,
and I got a bunch of them to sign it as well.
Now I think my ship is garbage, but at the time it was my OTP. But I shipped Xander and Buffy, and now I hate everything about it. So when you find out he's basically Joss and that Joss is Joss, you go, oh, everything I knew was a lie. Why did I believe? And it's horrible. Still not a Buffy Angel fan though. If I'm gonna go, I would go Buffy Spike if I was gonna go canon.
Okay.
So canon vampire. Though I have problems with that episode of Buffy that we can all probably think of with Buffy Spike that did something that I really have problems with. But oh well.
But here's my controversial spin. I prefer the Angel show over Buffy.
That is
I know. It's like maybe because it was more adult, and I just got to the point where I was like, I kind of side. It got better. First season was shaky, but it got better, and it was just no different. But you know, that's my anyway. Right,
I prefer Torchwood to Doctor Who. I guess that's my hot take.
Ooh, controversial.
But I'm an American, and I have crappy taste. It's fine. I just really like Torchwood.
It was a fun show. It's all around Cardiff. I can walk around and I see all these things.
And so, in fairness, I don't actually think you can compare Torchwood to Doctor Who. But like as a spin-off, I quite love Torchwood. It was a hot mess. It was a good hot mess, but it was a hot mess.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Okay.
I do have salty opinions about Moffat. So
yeah.
I'm a Russell T Davies girl, and a David Tennant girl. So
I love David Tennant. I think he's still my favorite Doctor.
He's the best.
I just, he's done so many things. He's done lots of shows over here and since then. But
I mean, I was such a hardcore stan. I got my hands on the Region 2 DVD of Casanova back in the day. I was intense.
Yeah, I remember that.
Now you could find those things easily, but then harder.
You had to be on the money. Yeah. Okay.
That was Moffat, or was that Russell T Davies? Moffat might have been involved, actually.
Someone will know. Someone will know more than us. Anyway, we've been rambling on a lot.
Sorry.
Coupling.
This is now a British thing. Yeah, I love Coupling. I just don't like Moffat as the showrunner of Who. I like his other stuff. Though I have Sherlock feelings too, anyway.
Yeah, the vampire one that they did, the Dracula one, I didn't like that one.
Oh yeah, that looked terrible. I didn't even bother watching it.
It wasn't good. It just, the idea was good.
Hyde was also a mess.
Yeah, it didn't work. It didn't work either. I think it just, I don't know. I think you can't ring the same drum so many, bang the same drum so many times. It just doesn't work. Yeah. I think it's a struggle. Anyway, we're rambling now. We're basically just talking about TV. So we're going to call it a night. It's late for me here. It's afternoon for you. But you're going to enjoy the rest of your afternoon. I can go to bed. Basically. Okay, late lunch for you. Anyway, thank you for coming on, and thank you everybody for asking questions and for joining us tonight and this afternoon. It was great to talk to you, and hopefully, I'll talk to you again soon.
I'll get you on my channel.
Absolutely, yeah. Ask any questions about fantasy and stuff. Yeah, just ask me.
I know nothing about fantasy, let alone the adult market.
Okay, yeah. If people have questions, I'm happy to talk to them. Okay, good night, everybody. We'll see you all soon. Bye.
Bye.